All right, let's roll. So, this is X2Go, the Gathering 2020, aka RUS, the Virtual Remote User Symposium. And yes, we decided to pronounce it RUS, not virus. So, hello and welcome everybody to a very different edition of X2Go, the Gathering. A quick look at today's agenda. Gosh, we're fast. We're already at the second item. So we made it past the welcome message and are looking at the agenda, which means next up is my X2Go State of the Union address. Now, I'm not going to list all the breaks here, but we have a pre-recorded talk from Mike 1 about the HTML5 client, followed by Mihai's presentation about his work on libx2go client and Uli's peek into X2Go's plumbing the NX libraries. After that, Chris is going to tell us about an exciting use case for X2Go. And finally, Vadim will tell us how Kindle added real-time audio compression to their NX-based product QVD. So here it is, the State of the Union address. For those of you who are new to the project, I'm Stefan Bauer, X2Go's community manager and lead evangelist. Now, this year's event is our 9th annual community event and the 7th under the Gathering name. It's the second time at Shackspace, which came rather unexpected, but we're grateful that they're having us again. We'll definitely not set any new real-life attendance records this year, but this is obviously intentional. And including this State of the Union address, we'll have 6 talks, all of them today. So Saturday is completely free for coding and debugging sessions. On Sunday morning, we'll have the Orca meeting and maybe another coding session afterwards. So this is me doing last year's State of the Union address. And as you can see, it's difficult to make predictions, particularly about the future, because everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Well, not really the Fire Nation, but COVID-19, obviously. Which means that this year, everything's different. And usually we'd show the list of our sponsors here, but for such a small event, we didn't bother asking for any sponsorships. So some of our regular sponsors instead, like CFD Direct, have stepped up and offered to pay for improvements on the X2Go and X library code base instead, with money they had originally put aside for this year's gathering. And not only that, they even increased their usual donation amount. So this time, instead of listing the sponsors, we'll start off by looking at the overview of X2Go events in 2020 and 2021. Now, we had a scheduling conflict between Linux Days Chemnitz and the Pi and More event, and not enough volunteers for both. So we had opted to attend Pi and More. And they had already signaled that we could have a booth again there, because we've been there for the last 2 years or so. But in the end, it was all moot, as both events got cancelled on the same day. Linux Info Day Augsburg, Linux Weeks Vienna, and Hack for Glorious Summer suffered the same fate, just a few days or weeks later. They all got cancelled before their calls for presentations ended, or in some cases even before they started. The last victim so far was the TÜBIX, which was scheduled for late June and got cancelled by the end of April. But Open Power Summit North America not only got postponed, but turned into an entirely virtual event, which meant that we were finally able to take part there remotely. So we've had at least one virtual event in 2020 so far where we could present X2Go. Now, in the same week as the Open Power Summit, there's also this thing called X2Go the Gathering. Oh, hey, that's us. We decided to turn it into a hybrid event this year. So we'll have all the presentations today while still at home or in the office, and meet up in real life on Saturday and Sunday with only a handful of people. So Linux Day Austria rejected our submission, so we won't be there this year. But to be honest, our uplink here isn't all that great. So any live demo would have brought the risk of failing spectacularly while live on a virtual stage. So I'm not that sad that we didn't get accepted there. The Open Power Summit recording was a recording that they played, and we were only there for like 10 minutes of live Q&A, which made this a lot easier. Finally, another virtual event where we've been confirmed as speakers, the annual IT Congress at the New Ulm University. This will be a rerun of our 2019 talk, but updated to reflect how Tor can be used both as a dynamic DNS replacement and as a means to punch holes through firewalls to connect to your server. Now, Linux Expo Ulm was scheduled to take place in late November, but given our current infection rates here in the area, it is unlikely to happen as a real-life event and will probably not make sense as a virtual one either. And to finish off the year, Hack for Glarus was scheduled for early December, but they are having similar issues, so they decided to split their event into 4 smaller events, each with a different topic, and sadly X2Go doesn't fit under any of those topics, so we won't be attending this event either. Now, for 2021, Pi and More has indicated they want to run a replacement event for the one that was cancelled this year, sometime in March, but this will, of course, again depend on the health regulations in place by then, and I wouldn't be too optimistic about a March date. Maybe June, but March seems way too early at the moment. And for that very reason, there's a huge blank space in the middle of that slide. So any predictions would probably be outdated again by the time I hit the save button for this presentation, which means all I can say for sure is that there will be an X2Go The Gathering 2021. And for that, there are 2 or maybe 3 options. If the pandemic is under control, then we'll head back to Linux Hotel, and it will take place sometime in the late 3rd or early 4th quarter, so people have more time to catch up with their to-do lists, as everybody is likely to have fallen behind on X2Go things during the COVID-19 pandemic. On the other hand, if we're still facing an uncontained pandemic by the beginning of the 3rd quarter of 2021, then we'll either meet at Checkspace again or go completely virtual. If there will be a real-life meeting, it will be in early Q3 because the weather is more likely to allow for outdoor meetings, or at least for leaving the windows open permanently. So COVID-19 has an influence on both X2Go in general, as well as on this State of the Union address. This year, I'll spare you my usual whining about how we lack volunteers and how participation on the mailing list is low, and I also won't set any hard goals. We'll still have enough time for that next year once the pandemic is over, and the priority right now is that you all take care of yourself and of your loved ones. Stay healthy. Now, we do have some short-term goals for the next 3 days, and these are coming up after the next 2 slides. But before looking at these goals, I would like to remind you again that yes, we do have a lot of things to work on, but take your time. If you've committed yourself to a task and suddenly feel overwhelmed, speak up. Don't just disappear from the face of the earth, but don't force yourself to work on something that's dragging you down either. Just speak up and let us know that you're busy with something else at the moment. Now, 2 items from my usual complaint list remain. The second one with a slight twist though. First of all, we really need to start doing dev meetings again so we can get releases out. And I'm wondering if maybe we should use Jitsi instead of IRC for that. And also with real-life events being out of scope at the moment, how can we advertise X2Go? So if anyone has media contacts or some other idea, please let me know. Okay, we are slowly approaching the end, so let's look at what's planned for today. Mike 1's talk will show the work in progress on the HTML5 client. This will be a recording because he had a scheduling conflict, or initially thought so. We're glad to have him back now. Mihai's talk will show the current state of libx2go client, which is a prerequisite to allow Reminer to talk to an X2Go server. And as in the previous years, Uli has worked on the NX code a lot, and his talk will cover that. And after that, Chris Greenshields from CFD Direct, one of our longtime sponsors, will be showing us their use case for X2Go. And finally, Vadim from Kindle will show us how they added real-time audio compression to their NX-based product QVD. Here are the main points for tomorrow's coding and bug squashing session. Uli and I will be taking a look at the NX clipboard issues. And Mihai will probably be working on libx2go client, but possibly on macOS related X2Go client issues and the code path in X2Go client regarding the desktop environment selection as well. These two items depend on the availability of Mike 2. He has indicated he might be able to make it, but he can't guarantee for it. And Yuri, if he shows up in the afternoon, which he might tackle X2Go Thin Client Edition or Debian Live in general on the Raspberry Pi again. So there's a larger list of to-do items in the wiki. These are just the main points, the more important points that I figured I should list here. And on Sunday, finally, Sunday morning, we'll have our Orca club meeting. We would have time for another round of coding, bug squashing afterwards, but my guess is that this would only be Uli and me. So I'm going to leave that up to Uli if he wants to show up or not. So that's all, folks. Thanks for your time. If you have any questions, I'll be monitoring the YouTube chat and the Jitsi channel and the IRC in a moment. And after the break, it's time to play the recording of Mike 1's talk.
Stefan.
Yes, I can hear you.
I have not checked how long my presentation will be, so maybe I will have an overly long presentation or overly short. I don't know. So are we flexible or do we have hard time constraints?
Let me check the schedule again. I guess I finished a tad bit early. The timer inside LibreOffice said something about 10 minutes when I had aimed for 20. So there's a bit of buffer space now. Okay, Mihai isn't ready for his presentation yet, but since Mike's presentation is already pre-recorded, he can watch that later on if he wants to. So I would say we take a 5-minute break now and roll Mike's video at 6:20. Is that okay for everyone?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, good for me.
And Chris has agreed via the chat.
Stefan, I think Matt has dropped out of the channel.
Yes, it looks like that. I don't know why. I haven't seen a message from him.
Okay.
Let me check my email while we're in break.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm here. I just was in the live stream on YouTube for a bit.
Okay, we were just wondering.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to hear your updates. Thanks for doing that. I look forward to the next one. So it's going to start in 3 minutes or so.
3 minutes, and then we'll roll Mike's video. I hope this works. If not, I'll post the link to his video on the wiki again.
Well, or I'll redo the talk.
Yeah, you have time now.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens.
Good. Sounds good.
A
You
lot
guys,
of
you guys have made so much progress on this project in the last 8 years. It's amazing to me. You guys have a lot of things to be proud of for all the work that you did to make this product so stable. It's come a long way.
Yeah.
It definitely has. And yet we have so many open bugs and so many things that are still in planning and pre-production and beta phase. And
Yeah, that's what you want. That's success, because people care about it enough. They want features. They want to extend it. So you're on the right path.
Yeah. Thanks for encouraging us and appreciating that.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
Thanks a
you're
lot.
welcome. Okay, I'm gonna step away. I'll be back for the presentation.
Okay.
all right, so Mike, when I roll the video, just let me know if it displays correctly on your end. And if not, I'll stop it and we'll do it live.
Yeah, okay. Hopefully it works.
Hey, at least you had a chance to rehearse it.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so go. Now?
1 minute.
Half a minute or so, yeah, okay.
All right, time to roll the video. Okay, everybody. Mike is unable to attend our meeting live, so he has decided to pre-record this session. And so over to you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. So, hi to everyone. Good evening. I'm sorry that I can't be there live for this talk. I'll be alive tonight, yes. So we recorded this around 1 o'clock on Friday the 18th. And I'm going to talk to you about a project that probably best way to say is outsourced to two young developers over the summer. So I had two students in my company, and they worked on a web-based remote desktop solution thingy prototype draft. So the code name for that, and it might change in the future, is Remote Web App. And it's a web application where you can access a desktop session running on some machine. So throughout this talk, and Stefan, please feel free to interrupt me if you have questions. So we don't have an audience, so you are the audience right now. So just
no worries, I will.
Yeah, if anything comes up, or if I'm too fast, or if I miss bits and pieces, then just ask. So we'll, go through what we did, what happened, the story, the design of what we came up with. Actually, then we'll do a live demo. I hope that works fine. So we had quite a few issues with the Chromium browser freezing, so I might disappear and come back then. And then we'll, I'll just give you some ideas what actually could be done with the solution that we worked on, or with the project we worked on. So first of all, many of you, especially from the Windows world, people from the Windows world, you know that there is this one big thingy called TeamViewer where you can access a remote desktop, and they really made the remote thing a business model and sell it with high prices to companies, especially for remote support. So that is not really an X2Go use case or something in X2Go we would like to do, but it's something that is there on the market and that there is demand for it, and there is no floss solution for that either. So that is one thing I had in mind when I got developers into my company and asked them to work on this project. So, and they worked on a web-based solution, a web-based desktop session viewer and remote controller. And the goal or the demand at the beginning of the project was make it pluggable, please, so that we can actually use it at some point in X2Go. And a much easier use case to implement was a remote IT support tool. And actually, for the 2 students, that was more fun. So I'll come to that, where we started and where we ended up. And this web-based desktop sessions viewer thingy could also be an administration front end for a session broker, like the X2Go session broker. It could be, well, anything that relates to controlling users, controlling computers, controlling sessions, viewing them, creating thumbnails if needed of sessions, etc., etc. So this is really, there's potential for more. So I got two students in. One is Jonathan, or Jonathan in German, and he's a student at a school in Lübeck where I do IT support. And he is a real Django expert. And so Django is a web framework written in Python, or you can write web frameworks in Python with Django. Jonathan is also a common web developer, so he is into JavaScript, CSS, Material, CSS, and stuff like that. So, and he's also a co-maintainer or co-developer of Alexis. And Alexis is something that we'll hooked up into, and it's a Django-based web solution for managing schools. So that sounds off topic here, but it's not, because the Alexis people really put an effort into writing a rock solid and stable core, and at the same time scalable and customizable and pluggable. So there are current development efforts of getting rid of the school implementation and rip that out of Alexis and move that into plugins, and leave a core with ACL design and with whatever. And you can normally you always have to change config options if you extend a Django site, but Alexis is just, you drop in files at the right location, and then you have something other, some other feature added to Alexis. So this core is really an interesting thing to build other products on. And then Daniel, he lives near my place here in Northern Germany, and he has been my staff member for a couple of years now already. And he's really a talented guy, and he knows Java, JavaScript, CSS, and now after this project, he got involved in QML QD Quick. So whatever task I give him, he takes 2 days, and then he's really an expert in that. So it's an amazing young developer, and both are really talented. So I took these 2 into my company, and I asked them to sit together for 3 weeks online. So Jonathan worked from Lübeck, and Daniel from here, from the place where I live, and we had, well, not daily, but nearly daily chats, and invented a design for a remote desktop solution. And the inspiration for that actually came from Heinz. So, and what we did was Heinz Markus Grazing, and what we did is we turned Alexis into a remote desktop web application. So, and at the beginning we wanted to do that for X2Go, in fact, but it came out that how X2Go works internally was a bit clunky and clumsy to teach to these young developers. And it's not because they are not talented enough, it's just because it's a bit, X2Go is quite peculiar, let's say it that way. So we thought about another use case that I also had in mind before, and that they actually really fell in love with, and that was an IT support tool for basically providing IT support on some local machine by someone else on the network. So, and the design we came up with, and a lot of stuff of that is not documented yet, but it will be, is something that can be really scaled to an enterprise level at the very end. So, and it's at the moment, it's really a proof of concept that it works and that one could go that pathway. So what we have, so we say we need, I'm sorry for that, we need a little GUI application, and this GUI application is something that people who use TeamViewer know it's an application where you can say, hey, I want remote support, and then you click something or you enter something, and then someone visits you on your machine and your desktop is shared to that person. So that is here on the slide in the bottom left corner, the support client. Let me just see. No, that's on the right. Sorry, I'm sorry. It's the remote client, the big box on the right, and the upper part, remote support desktop, that is the GUI application that the user on the local machine opens up, launches, and demands remote support. So this application talks to a session bus, a dbus session bus, and this session bus establishes a bidirectional communication with a Django-based web server application. So that is on the top left. And this Django-based web server application provides basically a desktop viewer and means to control that desktop session in a web browser. And that is on the very left at the bottom, the remote web app support client. So that is the machine or the browser that the support IT staff person sits in front of. Yeah, so we have a lot of boxes and we have arrows, but that's the basic idea. So, and that is all on localhost. So it could be, we have ideas in mind to actually provide one support framework over multiple intranet, VLANs, whatever, and then have several Django servers on the network where the support people log into, and then, yeah, but it's just, this happens all on one machine. So it's all on localhost. So, and yeah, that was quite fast. Stefan, any questions from your side?
Not up here, here, no, not until here, no.
Okay, good. Okay, so then but, we come.
We have used up 10 of your 20 minutes now.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll come to the live demo. Okay, so this is black. I switched to another screen, and on this screen, this is quite crowded here. I move it into the center. So wait, let's just move this.
I think you should hold still for a moment so the video stream has a chance to catch up.
Yeah. I'll prepare things. So, okay.
Yeah, that looks fine.
Okay, so I'll wobble a little bit. I hope this was visible on the stream. That window is a VirtualBox machine. So I'm lazy, I use VirtualBox and not QEMU anyway. And I have a local session running in this machine with a Mate desktop. And this black application, this dark application window here in the middle, which can also be bright theme, but this is playfulness, is my drafted remote support desktop client. So, and here I can say, actually it's in German, but I guess, yeah, that's fine. Here I can say, please launch a remote desktop, a remote support session. So the little, is it green or is it yellow? The little light on the left
Looks yellow to me.
Yeah, I think it should be. Maybe it becomes even greener when I'm logged in. Maybe let's see if it changes color once the remote support person is on the machine. So what I get presented with is a URL, and this URL is this virtual machine, this VBox container, and a specific path. So what I do is I move the virtual box machine a little bit aside. Okay, and I'll try to duplicate the path here by typing this. So it presents me with the exact session where I want to, oh, that's why I love. Let's see how that works. Okay, so whatever went wrong there. So let's say login. And I use the pin presented in the remote support application. So I'll enlarge this a little bit so that we get a left border, and I say remote web app. And now I see that there is a session waiting for me on this IP, and this is the port where the VNC server is listening. And okay, it's not X2Go, it's VNC, and I say join. So, and then the desktop app, the client application that launched the remote desktop session, minimized, and yeah, it should be actually in the tray, but it's not right now. But anyway, but I can see the remote session in the web browser, and I move my mouse over the VNC session in the web browser, and I can sort of remote control this machine on the other side. So I launched an application. What I can also do is I can upload a file. So let me see if there's, yeah, here's some screenshot from a debugging thingy from another project. So okay, and we can see here's the file, and also on the other computer, of course. Yeah, this LibreOffice launch I shouldn't have done. Okay, so let's just click that away. Yeah, so the file I just uploaded.
I just noticed this LibreOffice launcher coming up. Was that because the file upload dialog?
No, I clicked it in the application menu. I wanted to demonstrate that I can remote control the machine. I clicked in the browser.
Okay.
I clicked here in the menu, and then something happened in the VirtualBox machine.
Gotcha.
So okay, these controls. So the what is used here for getting the remote desktop here is VNC, of course. So we have on the local machine we have X11 VNC, which is a mirroring VNC X11 to VNC application that opens up a VNC server to the outside. We pipe that through WebSockify and whatnot, and we use NoVNC, which is a JavaScript-based VNC viewer, to see what's on the other side of the VNC stream. So, and then we have, as I said, we have a bidirectional communication protocol. Well, let's say some sort of communication. The protocol really needs to be well defined still, but it's possible to trigger events on the Django web app side, but it's also possible to trigger events from here. So what I can also do is I can, for example, this is pretty simple, but I can finish the remote support, and this doesn't kill the X11 VNC on this side. It tells the Django web server, the web app, to actually stop this sharing, and then I should see that on the other end. So the disconnected comes from NoVNC, but yeah, this logout action has been triggered by the client on this on the local machine where the support was running. Okay, so the live demo worked. Any questions about that?
So we have a little bit more than 3 minutes left for your talk. So I guess you should explain a bit how what the future plans are for this.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
how do we
yeah.
get X2Go Classic with the NX libraries, and how do we get X2Go K-Drive integrated into this?
Yeah, yeah, okay. So the main problem is actually funding. At the moment, my working situation is I can only nearly only work on projects that I can generate funding for, and so this is something that's definitely needed. And then we could do anything. So before I go into that, while setting up the test setup last night, I thought, my God, we have so many Python dependencies and so many Qt dependencies and so many. So the number of packages that tumbled in while preparing the setup was quite ridiculous. So this is something that needs to be looked at. Whatever we do with it, we need to shrink the dependency footprint. But we could, for example, replace the no VNC viewer by a JavaScript-based X2Go car drive client, and this is not really science fiction. It's something that exists already. I have the code available in my mails from Alex, but I did not come around to testing it yet. But that is definitely something we could do. We could also wrap VNC around X2Go sessions running in NX libs. So that would be a workaround for us not being able to get NX X11 based sessions directly into the browser. So that could be an option too, so that we change X2Go server in a way that we have a VNC desktop sharing mode, and then we could at least hook into already existing X2Go sessions. So we can, whenever an X2Go session has been launched on a machine, we can connect to that and move that into the browser session. And we could then also go steps further, that we could launch X2Go NX agent-based sessions headless in the background and attach the X11 VNC server to that, and so that you don't have to launch the X2Go session from a normal X2Go client, but get that basically script launch on the server directly and then attached to the browser-based viewer session. So we could this web UI could also become a controlling admin controlling thingy, or also user controlling thingy for Python X2Go broker-based environments. So that could be another way to actually drill it up. It could be an admin UI for X2Go session brokers, so that site admins can monitor whatever is going on in their X2Go server cluster. You could definitely combine the remote IT support tool with X2Go functionality. So there might be use cases where people work on X2Go in X2Go sessions all day, and they also have need for IT support. So that would be a nice combination then to provide. And what we also have been thinking about regarding the remote IT support thing is that you could attach multiple Django servers to this desktop app that launches or that triggers the remote support, so that if the first level support is really clueless at some point, they can say, okay, I can use the same tool now to get another supporter from the second level or third level support onto the same machine or the same X2Go session, and sort of have.
So it's remote support technicians all the way up.
Yeah, exactly. So normally you have, if you have a team viewer session, then and the first level doesn't know how to continue, then the second level takes over. But you could also have something where the first level says, I'll get someone from second level in, and they both stay on the same session, so that the first level learns from the second level, and maybe next time can handle things by himself, by herself, by themselves. Yeah.
Okay, I think we'll already passed your allotted time frame. So thanks for the presentation.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll have a chance to see you live in like a few days, a few weeks for a smaller meeting.
Yeah. So we'll. Yes. So if people are interested in that, and if maybe, I don't know, maybe
Because
your
usually we would
company-
have a Q&A session right after your talk, but since you're not available today,
Yeah.
we should probably do that in a few days or a few weeks.
Yeah, if
just
there's
for-
need for it, get the people together, and then we can sort of
Okay.
make
Cool.
up an arrangement, and then we can sort of do a Q&A
Mhm.
after
Cool.
the gathering.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. Okay.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Okay, so this was the video, and since Mike is available, he can take questions now. I see that someone wrote something in the chat. Let me check.
Mihai, in the chat.
Yeah.
Hi, Mihai, by the way.
Okay, so Chris Greenshields wrote thanks in the chat.
Okay.
So wait, let me turn my camera first.
Sorry, I thought I forgot he I forgot it was recorded, and I thought he was disappearing. So then I was like confused. I forgot it was recorded. Sorry about that. I couldn't tell the difference between reality and the
It was so relaxing watching my own talk without having to do it, really. It was so nice. And actually, I expected my family being back by this time and standing in the kitchen and preparing dinner. So, but they sort of, there was a time shift here, and so I could actually watch myself doing a talk.
So we have 5 minutes left for your Q&A. I'll just check IRC if someone was watching there and asking questions there, as well
Yeah.
as the YouTube channel. And we'll have Mihai start his talk by 1850. So Uli gets 10 minutes extra.
Yeah.
Since he asked for it.
Okay.
Mihai, can you give me a quick microphone check?
Yeah. Does it?
Okay,
Yeah. It
works.
does work. Okay.
So let me just correct one thing. There has been funding available for doing this web thingy, this remote web app project, and there is, and we didn't arrive at a place where it's actually something X2Go can use already, but it's something that we can build on top of and make it available for X2Go. So when I said it needs funding, I especially meant to make it really production ready. It will be a lot of work with work focus needed on such a tool. So that was to be more clear about that part of the talk. Okay.
All right. Any further questions? Because the IRC channel and YouTube channel are empty, are void of questions. Anyone here? Okay, then just a quick break, and Mihai will start by 1850.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I'll just as a side note, I'll hang around here until 7:15 about, so I can. Mia, it's you who's doing the next talk, right?
Yep.
Okay. And then I'll say goodbye, and I'll watch you on YouTube sometime later this weekend to catch up. Yeah. Thanks for being at the gathering virtually and being interested in X2Go.
And while we're still on break, I guess I should point out that I'll put links to all the recordings and slides and everything into the wiki as soon as I have them uploaded somewhere. And here we go. Mihai, it's your turn.
Great. Okay, so let me tell you something about Reminar and X2Go integration. So before we start, let's talk about Reminar really quickly. Reminar is a remote desktop client for POSIX-based systems. It's plugin based so that each protocol can be used via a different plugin, but it also has a uniform UI for basically like everything you want to do. So you don't have to teach users new concepts when using remote desktop software. It's reminiscent of the TS client, terminal server client, that has been once shipped within GNOME, but fell out of grace, I don't know, like 10 years ago, something like that. So I guess that this is the continuation of this effort. TS client basically was only a fancy UI that wrapped around programs like RDesktop or VNC clients and other stuff. Reminar does have support for quite a few protocols, one of which is NX, also SPICE, XDMCP, SSH directly for X11 forwarding, VNC and RDP. And we'd like to have another plugin for X2Go sessions, because X2Go sessions and NX sessions, while X2Go uses NX internally, they're not the same, and they can't be spawned, just easily. Okay, and this is why, this is one of the reasons why we came up with the libx2go client. So libx2go client is a library that is supposed to, a client-side library that is supposed to eventually maybe even replace the SSH implementation and the session handling stuff within X2Go client. But the nice part is that we can also use it as a basis for the Reminar X2Go plugin once it's really ready. It's supposed to be written in C, based upon glib and gobject. So basically you get all the asynchronous stuff, well, not for free, but mostly for free. And most importantly, we don't want to use other libraries like libssh or libssh2 because they are never really up to date when it comes to protocol support, but rather use OpenSSH directly. So we just take the OpenSSH client and wrap it around. We create a master connection and then multiple channels however we need it. That sounds great, but it turns out that, well, OpenSSH is buggy too. Anyway, so this project has been going on for the past 2 years, I guess, or 1.5 years. Last year, I've already had written up a parser for different connection types, because you can essentially have OpenSSH connect via IP addresses or DNS names or even shorthand for hosts. So far, we can open up a master connection, which is periodically checked. I've written small testing applications that uses the library internally in order to open just one connection and wait for 30 seconds in order to close it up again. And yeah, and we also have a check that makes sure that the master connection stays alive. Right. This wasn't easy because for once, OpenSSH is buggy. Normally, when you start, well, not normally, but when you start OpenSSH with the control master and control persist options, it should open up the connection, authenticate, then fork off a process, and this process should then close stdout and stdr both, become the master process and controlled via Unix sockets, and the main process should actually continue executing whatever program or command you've given it. And that works. And there's been a bug report around, like 2 years ago, that was fixed because it didn't close stdr correctly. Now with the F flag, the client can also demonize, that is, just detach before running any command. And that is interesting if you like try to run X11 forwarded programs or stuff like this, or if you don't care for keeping the program, the SSH program open indefinitely. Unfortunately, this flag has the side effect of basically sidestepping the fix that was implemented for the control master and control persist operation, which means that that stdr in the child process stays open, stays connected to the controlling terminal and to the controlling library, and we cannot detect whether the program actually stopped and detached, so forked into background basically, and then the original program just went away, or whether the child is still executing, because both programs are connected via the stdr pipe. I've had to debug this quite extensively and came up with a solution. Basically, we just check whether OpenSSH has this bug or not, and well, either close stdr or leave it running. But that also meant that I will have to parse the version number of the OpenSSH client and introduce a new bug quirks infrastructure. So far, we have only one quirk, which is the stdr not closing thingy, but it's extensible to other quirks as well, because well, OpenSSH isn't perfect, and even internally, it does have a list of quirks that can be used to work around, well, bad behavior in older clients or servers, or interact properly with those buggy clients and servers. Now I could optimize it further, but I didn't have time for that because I also had to write up the whole master connection thingy. So that's something for later maybe. Now, after we've actually spawned a master connection, we also have to make sure that it stays alive and detect whether it just went away or not. Now, usually you could say, well, don't fork it into the background, and you could be doing that, but then you'd have to spawn it into a different thread and synchronize that as well with the main thread. And the biggest problem I've had with that is that if I keep the main process running, it's easy to detect when it actually disconnects, but it's also impossible to connect to really know if it was actually spawned successfully. So I said, okay, let's just have it detach and continue from there on. Which meant that I needed to write up another periodic check. Now, the easiest way, just spawning a main loop and a timer or timeout in glib parlance, didn't quite work out correctly because, well, it's a library and you don't want to hook the main process, basically. So what I've had to do instead was to make this all threaded, create a new thread, launch the main loop and context and timer or timeout in the new thread. And I've currently set it to run every 3 seconds and check the connection status every 3 seconds. But that may not be good enough. Well, eventually, after debugging everything, and I want to have it run every 50 milliseconds, and that's fine. A static value may be fine, but I'm not quite sure if a static value is good because, well, basically,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Matt asks via chat, is there already a bug report file
Yeah.
to describe this OpenSSH issue
Yeah,
and possibly
yeah,
a suggested
yeah.
fix that would work for the Reminar integration? And your
I
camera
haven't.
is, or your screen is glitching.
It's
There
glitching.
we are again. You're back.
No,
Yeah,
no, it's
back.
it's
Oh,
okay.
good.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, dear.
supposed to glitch. Just let me.
Oh,
get
and by the way, halftime mark.
Yeah. No, I'm just looking this up. There's a bug report right here. So that's a bug report that I've written, but nobody actually took action on that. Right. Well, it's not a big bug. It's not a huge bug. We can easily work around it, but I just have to update the version numbers every now and then, or just rework that. Yeah. So, but okay, but basically, a static, check timer value is okay. Because what the check timer does is just connect to the local Unix socket of the controlling master process and ask it whether it's still alive. Well, check whether it connects and is still alive by issuing a ping or check message and expecting a reply. But that may not be good enough because basically what we want to have, or what we get for free if using the OpenSSH client, is additional features like Unix socket forwarding. So that's a great thing, but if you continue going down that road, you could imagine that maybe the master connection is not actually running on the local machine, but on a remote machine, and we just forward the Unix socket. So even if to the local machine, the Unix socket looks like a local one, it may not really be one, which means that maybe we have to make this timeout or timer dynamic and find out the round trip time or anything like that. But I haven't done any of that stuff. It's just in my head and written up properly in a comment. Good. Now, further on, yeah, I want to continue the implementation. I want to well, having a master connection is nice to have, but I really need channels. So I really need ways to spawn other commands and stuff like that over the master connection. And I haven't at all done this yet. So that's one of the things that needs to come next. Also, we don't have any support for real sessions yet. I need to define the session format and data and objects. But it's going along. And other things are also missing. But we now have a basis, and it's at least it's working for what it is supposed to do. Just issue an OpenSSH connection. And yeah, I guess I'm done with the talk as far as I've got it.
Okay, that
Andy.
leaves a little bit more than 5 minutes for a Q&A. Any questions? Uli would like to speak. So,
Okay.
Uli, unmute your mic and speak up.
Okay, Mihai, as I've understood it, you implement that OpenSSH stuff into the lib X2Go client.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be, have you thought about an approach that you write a replacement lib for libSSH that is maybe even AP compatible, that only does the OpenSSH stuff and not any X2Go stuff?
Well, there isn't one. It would be nice to have something like that, but it just doesn't exist, and you'd have to implement it within OpenSSH itself. I mean, as far as I know, there have been there has been interest in implementing something like this, but I don't think that it ever really worked out, or nobody actually did it.
So that was your chance.
Yeah, well, in theory, but it's more complicated than that.
So in fact, we had this discussion earlier to actually have the X2Go specific part in one library and have an SSH wrapper library on the other end. and then bring those two together, and that's then libx2go client sort of. Yeah, I wonder if it's still an option, because Nito wants to come in, he says. Just let him in. So I wonder if it's still an option to actually split out the OpenSSH wrapping part of the code from what is X2Go specific at the end. So what could come from that is that other people who want just wrap around OpenSSH in a C program can benefit from the SSH wrapper library, while they don't have to, you know, they don't see the X2Go specific parts.
Well, I don't see why this shouldn't be possible. Right now, we don't have any X2Go specific stuff in there anyway. So it's just the OpenSSH wrapper.
Oh, so you can just rename the library and then we're done. Okay.
Basically, yeah. Well,
yeah, maybe
it won't do anything great.
Yeah.
But maybe.
Yeah, maybe please do that. Because I think having a C library that can handle OpenSSH really well is something that's needed on in the free software world.
Yeah, maybe. Well, yeah, we could do that. I mean, I'd rather not do this right now, because, you know, I have other stuff to do on the libx2go client front, and it would take too much time to well, it's not really too much time to split it out, but I'd have to find a way to link in another library and use that, and I don't know. I just don't want to do this right now. But basically, the idea behind libx2go client also is that you can have multiple ways to communicate with a server, right? Because you can use SSH, but you can also use like a TCP socket if you want to. If we finally decide that we want to have a real X2Go protocol.
Nito would like to chime in. Nito, just unmute your microphone and speak up.
Oh, okay. No, just as a feedback on that side. In QVD, what we've done, our communication channel is HTTP. Okay.
Yeah.
So what we wrapped basically was the core, and inside that we use the MX libraries, and there we found out some bug of running out of
file descriptors.
File descriptors in X2Go, but that's fixed now. So we reported it back, and that was fixed. But just so it's basically we used a different transport level, and then hook that in. So just as an option, perhaps it might be. I know it would be really difficult to get all the other bits and pieces out there, but basically we hooked a different transport level and then used the NX channels to do all the other bits like sound and bits and bad like that. Just as a hint, information so that you can digest it.
Yeah, because we have already implementation for TCP sockets within NX, basically,
Well, just for your information.
Okay, but yeah, the general idea is to not have, you know, one way to connect to an X2Go server, but a plugin based implementation too, because
but then you even more need the really X2Go specific handshake session stuff, X2Go run command launching, whatever, in a completely different library. And then what you're working on now needs a very specific API interface for these two to interoperate, and then we can actually drop and kick out the libSSH wrapper thingy, and then have a libTCP wrapper or HTTP, whatever protocol we might actually use. And then, but the X2Go specific library always sees the same API, no matter what the protocol stack, and be it what layer in the TCP stack, be it. So that would be quite interesting to actually look at.
We have another question from Matt in text chat here. He says the bug for OpenSSH was logged months ago and hasn't been assigned. Is that project pretty slow? Is there any other way to motivate them to fix that?
I don't know. I guess the OpenSSH project is pretty slow to respond to any bug report, because most of them are difficult to actually reproduce and stuff. In that case, it isn't, but not many users actually need the things that we are doing here. So it's probably, I mean, if I were to ping them on the OpenSSH Devil mailing list, they would probably look into that. But I haven't done that because it's really not such a big deal in the end. It would be nice to have it fixed, but it's not a deal breaker.
Yeah. Whenever it gets fixed, you put that version into your workaround thingy, and then and until, I mean, you can work around it, and you need to become aware when you don't have to work around it anymore, and then it's fine.
The only information that I lose is whatever OpenSSH client writes on STDR, but normally you shouldn't have a lot of data on there anymore.
Yeah, another comment from Matt. Thank you. It is hard to know how much effort your workaround is taking versus getting upstream to fix.
Yeah.
I don't think it's really a big issue to fix. I mean, it's difficult. I don't think that it's difficult to fix. I think it's rather easy to fix because you can just close the file descriptor in question before doing any work. They just haven't done so, basically. And you also have to make sure that you don't close the file. I don't remember what I've written there. If it makes sense to keep STDR open in the general case, if you're not using it with the master connection. But I think that even then it doesn't really make sense because you just want to have the main process detach and that's it. On the other hand, maybe you want to have information that comes via STD are from the program that you launch on the console. So, well, or the terminal. So anything goes.
Yeah. But in general, I think Matt is right. Some projects, with some projects, you really have a hard time upstreaming bug fixes, and with others, they are so responsive. For example, the Remina developer, that's mainly one person, and I guess a second one in the background. They are highly responsive and open to suggestions and have time for questions. They don't have so much time looking into your pull requests when they don't work. So that but yeah, and with projects like OpenSSH, I guess they have a packed bug tracker anyway with open bugs, and we are not responsive to all the bug submitters either. So we have in fact quite a few patches pending in the bug tracker at the moment.
I know.
Mia, any estimation how long it might take to actually get a very simple X2Go session handshaked onto screen?
I don't know. It may take another year or so because it's really complicated to do this correctly.
Yeah. I mean it's
well, when I first started, I really had to wrap my head around how glib and gobject works, and I've had to implement everything there. And once I've got it skeleton and understood how it works, I could go on and implement stuff. Also, I implemented stuff that actually will never be able to use because, for instance, I wanted to have OpenSSH connect to an anonymous Unix socket. That is Unix sockets. No, abstract Unix sockets, right?
Okay. Kernel abstract Unix sockets.
Kernel abstract Unix sockets. But it turned out that you can't actually, well, at least from a shell, you can't give it such a name because it starts with a null character.
Yeah. You can't.
And you can't even do this. So I've written up all the parsing for it, but you will never be able to use it actually. But that's how it goes.
Okay.
So from your point of view, wouldn't it make sense to redesign the X2Go protocol so that your library can establish a session much easier?
Well, eventually, yes, maybe, but not right now because that's a task for a lot more time.
Yeah, and at the same moment, it is something if you have this SSH wrapper thingy, and you have the X2Go library in a separate thing, and you're not stuck with QD5 anymore because that's what makes the client so bulky, and so you can in fact then start thinking about another implementation of a remote desktop protocol, which is incompatible with what X2Go is doing, but maybe more, much smarter in maybe utilizing dbus and maybe a session service in the background and a GUI that connects to that service, stuff like that. So, but that is really reinventing the wheel and should not be part of the libx2go client project.
No,
really.
It's way too complicated. But eventually, I mean, I'd like to have something like a real server running on an X2Go server-based server, whatever. So a real service that listens via TCP or Unix sockets or whatever and communicates with the client directly without having to spawn connections via OpenSSH.
I think it's time for you to leave. Don't get in trouble with your family.
Yeah, I know. I've noticed. I'll head.
So one more thing I would like to mention. I think adding those quirks is unavoidable because from my experience, you have to depend on SSH versions that major distributions ship, and they might decide to implement that bug, to backport it, or even not. So you need to find a way to come up with that version and handle that.
Yeah. And even that, if it's really, well, it's difficult to even apply a quirk to a patched OpenSSH version because so far I'm just checking the version directly, right? And I know that it hasn't been fixed yet as of OpenSSH 8.4. But if some distro manages to fix it, I won't be able to really detect it because I cannot know what they've done and how they're calling their OpenSSH library client. But yeah, in general, we need that infrastructure anyway. So that was something that I had to do anyway.
Okay, so we've extended the Q&A into the break so that Mike still had a chance to use his 5 minutes. But now we should take a quick break before it's time for Uli's talk.
Okay. Okay, so I say bye. Have a good evening. And some of you I meet back on Sunday morning, maybe.
Enjoy your dinner.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, it seems like we've lost Mihai. I don't know if he intends to come back. Indeed, he does. There we are.
Good. Oh, okay.
Okay, things are looking good. The live stream is still running. So as soon as the clock shows 1920, feel free to start. Ah, your microphone is muted.
Maybe better to activate it.
Yeah.
Makes sense, yeah. Okay, 2 more minutes. Time for a quick off-camera shake, wiggle, wiggle.
Hey, Stefan, it's Chris. I was just looking at the timings on the schedule. Is there like a mistake on there?
Let me check. I updated the schedule, so you might have to reload it.
Okay, I'm only asking because it's fine by me, but I think it goes 1920 to 1950 Uli, and then it goes 1930 to 1940 10-minute break.
Okay, let me just check that. The idea was to move Uli's talk up a bit, so he has like 10 minutes more for his talk. Maybe I messed it up somewhere. Let me check.
No, I was just letting you know. It's fine, but it's no problem for me.
Totally fine. Uli, you just start your talk in 1 minute, and I'll check the schedule while you're doing your presentation.
There's a break amidst my my schedule, so that's the problem.
Yeah, I'll fix it while you're present.
So my clock shows 20. Let's start this. As I told before, I haven't done any pre-run, so I don't know how long it will take. If it'll take too long, well, then I'll stop. Now, last time I was reporting the changes that went into 3.5.99.22, and now I report the changes that got implemented from there on. Don't expect too much because, well, I'm a lonely fighter at that front at the moment, so I'm the only one adding any code, almost the only one. So all depends on my mood and my time. Let's start with the fixes that came into the code. They are rather small most of the time, and most of the time you might not even notice that that special bug ever existed, but it was fixed. While while coding, I tend to recompile the code instead of starting a complete build session in a clean directory. So I had its strange bugs, and it turned out that the build infrastructure was simply broken. If you made a make a second time, it linked with the wrong libraries. So we fixed that. Then a long time ago, the logging code was introduced in NX Comp Shed, and obviously nobody ever tested it because once I activated it, the whole code crashed. That is fixed. And I found the problem that reconnects were impossible in some cases. You had a session and there was no way to connect to that session anymore because some internal checks did not include a special situation and prevented the reconnect totally. The only option was to kill the session. That is now also fixed. And then I found some code that didn't get some macro definition, so it compiled some old buggy code, included some old buggy code instead of the right new code. And it caused crashes that happened in real life. So we had 2 bugs of that and we fixed them. Then again, as every year, I had some work on the clipboard. That beast still haunts me, and it's still not working perfectly, but it's working much better. And together with Stefan, I will address some problems tomorrow and hopefully fix them. Then there are some realloc bugs in the font code. I don't remember exactly what the problem was, but it needed fix, of course. And if you pass special arguments, not really crafted, but just in some special order, it made the code crash. Also fixed. And I discovered a mem leak in full screen. So if you switch to full screen regularly, it would eat up some memory every time. No longer. Then I discovered that atom handling, X11 has atoms pointing at strings, and these atoms were handled wrong at some places. This is due to our system is compiled in 64-bit and the original code was 32-bit, and on 32-bit it was not a problem, but on 64-bit environments this was simply wrong, and it probably would show up at some mixed environments where you had 32 and 64-bit applications at once. Then the NX code has some key conversion feature that remaps keys in certain situations, and that key conf handling was not perfect because it activated itself on reconnect sometimes, and then you as a user had almost no chance to get this fixed again. So you had a broken session where some keys. Yeah, sorry.
I'm not sure if you were gone or if my connection was gone for a moment, but I had a screen freeze and no audio from you for a few seconds. Could
Can
anybody
anyone confirm?
It was okay for
I
me.
cannot confirm.
Looks okay in Seattle.
All right, please continue.
Okay, so you had no chance to fix that in a reasonable way as a user, and the only way was to kill the session and start a new one to get proper key handling again. And then we had some funny bug, caps lock weirdness. When you hit, I think it was Control Tab or Alt Tab, you could switch caps lock, and this wasn't really fixable from the user side too. The next one is also about reconnect stuff, where some options were lost. Options from the options file were lost during reconnect. And the next one is my favorite fix, because on reconnect, on startup, sorry, it took several seconds on my system where I just start the NX agent from the command line. I had a delay of 9 seconds, and on other systems this might even be longer, and that was all tied to parsing of XPM logos. I dropped them completely and two bugs in that. The one was that we had some XPM logos for X2Go and X on the disk, and they had to be read and parsed. That reading was broken and never used, but the parsing was the main problem because it really took ages. So I optimized those images and put them into the code, and now it's a blink of an eye and it's done. And I found a lot of stuff where variables were overwritten by other variables with the same name. And I fixed almost all of them. So you don't get too many surprises while coding. That was one part, that's what it fixes. Now we have the cleanup. As you can see, I have worked on 192 files and did a lot of changes. Even reduced the number of files we need. Most of this was code simplifications, where you could write some code in one line instead of 3 or 4. And scope improvements means moving variables to inner loops instead of defining them at the start of the code. Then white space fixes in the code. And I discovered, while doing the above stuff, I discovered lots of unused code parts and dropped them. And previously we had doubled a lot of Xorg code and activated that instead of the original Xorg code because we had some changes in them. And I reworked that whole system to reduce the number of lines that we have cloned and try to call the original upstream function as often as possible and do our changes around that code. And then I found that we still have an Xwin support in the code. And Xwin was a window manager that No Machine provided on the Windows side. As our code cannot compile on Windows, there's no sense in keeping that code. We never compiled NX1 from our code base. And then I streamlined some functions because they had some unused parameters and they had some return codes that nobody ever used. Okay, and here's again the broken support for icon files, so logo files on disk. I don't know if that is readable for you or it's too small. I just did some statistics about the code. As you can see, I had some reductions, some notable reductions, about 3,000 lines of code that got dropped. Now, apart from the fixes and the cleanup, I also added some enhancements.
There's a question by Matt. Hold on. He raised his hand. Matt, speak up, please.
Hi. I was wondering, this is maybe a stupid question, but I know that there was another project like Arctica that was also doing NX cleanup. Could you talk about this effort and how I can think about those two projects and what their differences are?
When I'm talking about NX, I mean Arctica NX.
Ah, thank you. Okay, I'm clear.
Some years ago, the X2Go people decided to move the NX Labs code into an external project and depend on that project. So there is no NX code that gets updated in X2Go without Arctica being involved.
Thank you for clarifying. I'm clear now.
Okay, where was I? Yeah. While restructuring code, while cleaning up, sometimes you discover stuff you didn't know about. So I found some undocumented parameters we can add to the NX call that never found their way into the man page. And so I added them, even if I didn't understand them 100%, but what I could find about them, I wrote to the man page. For example, you can limit the size of I forgot. Copy size is the name of the parameter, and I forgot what it did. Please look it up on the mount page yourself. You can now. Then, because of repeating clipboard problems being reported on the X2Go user mailing list, I added a keystroke where you can dump your current clipboard state. So this helps a lot in finding situations where the clipboard doesn't work anymore. And eventually, I will also add some code for resetting the keyboard, the clipboard, if it stops working. Then I discovered that we have long passed our release dates for NX Libs 3.6 or even 3.7. So I removed them from the README. And the whole code base was designed in a way that it simply exits when you close the session, and I added some machinery that cleans up the resources the code allocated, because that's the way it's supposed to work in Xorg, and NX is nothing but derived from Xorg. The next is also about Xorg machinery. There was a lot of code that did stuff where Xorg simply offers own mechanisms you can simply use. So many of these are the callbacks. So you can register code that gets called at certain situations, and you don't have to patch it into existing code. Much cleaner, and it saves a lot of lines. Then when you compile in some debug support, you now see in many debug messages, you can not only see the binary ID of a Xorg X11 client, but you can also see the name and even the parameters if it's run locally. That helps a lot when debugging, because you don't have to search who was issuing a command to NX, and it's just mainly for developers. Then I constantly found myself on the X2Go mailing list to tell people to use the latest binaries, because their special bug was already fixed there. And it turned out that it's not so easy to find where those binaries, those nightly builds are to be found. So I added them to the README. And while working on code, I constantly improved the debug messages that are included. And finally, we can now compile with GCC 10, which revealed a lot of a lot of code that is not clean. So we were forced to fix that code. The earlier GCCs didn't detect those problems. Then next is splash screen code, the X2Go logo you see when starting up the NX. This was overly complicated and scattered over a lot of places in the code. I moved it to one place and reduced it to way less lines of code and way less X11 calls. So that's just better and quicker, and the logo is now centered. Some time ago, I added the NX dialog binary that is used for as a replacement for the No Machines NX client. The original NX client had several functions. One was to present you the dialog for starting up a session. Another one was to simply show messages, like the remote server has disappeared, closing session, or something like that. And while NX dialog was part of the codes for some time, it was not used by X2Go or not used by NX agent by default. So I changed that. I think X2Go is still not using it, but pure NX is now using it automatically. Next is when you are using the timeout option, which will disconnect the session after some time of inactivity. You could not use the screensaver inside the session because the screensaving code was misused to implement the timeout option. I dropped all that.
X server can issue dialogs.
Oh,
Say it again, Mihai.
So that NX agent can add dialogues to the running session.
Yes, exactly.
Because we already have another way. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a nice thing to have to because, so you won't suspend immediately, but you will get a dialogue and it asks you, do you want to suspend? And then you say yes, or you say no, and then you sort of get out of the suspension thing.
Or it shows you when you, for example, switch on auto grab or switch it off.
Yeah.
It confirms your switch.
Okay, we're back again. Our stream is running. Uli, you can continue if you want.
Shouldn't this NX dialog not be like a lib indicator thingy for the taskbar maybe?
Maybe, but that's a completely other can of worms.
Okay.
We also have a ticket about redesigning that whole dialogue stuff. That's quite old, and Mike has added some ideas how to implement that.
Well, the question is, I don't want to have a pop-up every time, for instance, you enable or disable autograb. That would be killing user flow,
Yeah, okay, I get that.
Yeah. I mean,
maybe we
because
we should make that configurable.
Yeah, probably. Well, the thing is, if you have just a notification in the notification tray area that is shown by any desktop really, maybe not stuff like OpenBox or Fluxbox, but
yeah, but
most desktops can do that.
That could be really done so that some actions actually end up in a dialogue where you have to decide something.
Yeah.
And others are just lib notify notifications.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That would be.
I guess they have wrappers for that kind of stuff. So we don't. Yeah. We can do that via NX dialog. We just probably have to extend NX dialog to have notions of different types, like interactive types and notification type messages or something like that.
Okay,
it already has.
Going back to Uli's talk now. He has about 10 minutes left now.
One thing I have not on the slides is also related to NX dialog, and just comes to my mind. I have changed the code that it now also can display the currently configured keystrokes when you show certain messages, because these keystrokes were hard-coded in the text, but you could change them by the config file and it was not reflected in that text. That is now working. I was already talking about screen saving being possible within the session now when you use the timeout option. Now, I've documented within the code. The meaning of some internal atoms that was not clear, and they had some misleading names also. So I researched what they are used for and documented that. Then I tried to find all code we derived from Xorg and mark all changes we did. This was not done before, and so it was difficult to backport any fixes that came from Xorg, and this is easier now. Then a lot of code depended on fixed length strings that were allocated at program start. I removed most of them and used some string duplication or allocation code. So it's working better now. Because I'm using a self-compiled version of NX at my work, where I sometimes test fixes, I started to become confused what version I'm currently using. So I added codes for custom version string that you can set during compilation. And I enabled UTF-8 for clipboard code that was mysteriously missing all the time. We had some UTF code in the code, but it was not advertised to programs asking, do you support UTF-8?
That's actually something that might cause a clipboard bug.
It might cause or fix a clipboard, because previously
previously, like not announcing UTF-8 support. Like you have a string with some Unicode character in it, and you copy and paste it from one machine to the other. I could imagine that this gets mangled in some weird way, like before you applied your fix.
No, and well, the existing code had some logic by Dimbor that always sent UTF-8 content, but it did not announce that it is supporting UTF-8 code. So what you get now is the same you got before.
Okay.
It's just announced cleaner. We can talk that at length tomorrow. Okay?
Yes, please go on.
Okay. Now an ex-colleague of mine was working on updating the continuous integration stuff. Any commit we do will be compiled in Travis, and it is also now using GCC 10, and it also is using CLang, and it even supports PVS Studio, but only for those people that get their personal free key from them and adds them to his Travis account. But it's working nice, and PVS Studio is really a software that's great. We also had some new bugs, of course. That one I already had last year, but I didn't work on that one. There are some problems when cloning keyboards in shadowed sessions, and I still have not come around to look deeper into them. And then a lot of bugs came up from people using the Mutter window manager. It seems like this one is doing really weird stuff. And I was able to fix a bit of that, but it is not fixed as a whole. I must work more on that one. And the last one is a quite new one. It appears that the clipboard is slowing down when you are using an NX session, even the local clipboard. Most notably, when you have an sorry.
I believe I ran into that issue as well.
Ah, okay.
So we might be able to trace that down tomorrow.
I think it's a follow-up of clipboard stuff working better. It's when you have an NX session running and you have you're locally using Chrome, you can see that problem if you try to copy the URL bar. It takes sometimes several seconds before you even get the menu for where you can select copy.
Yes, that's exactly what I ran into just a different browser.
Okay, maybe we can look at that. Now, I have stuff lying around on my local disk that is not finished, and I have listed some of them. The mentioned colleague that also did the continuous integration worked with me on replacing all of the iMake stuff by Automake. That code is ready for a year now, but it must be updated for the current version, and somebody should take a look at it before we implement that. Then I think I started that 2 years ago to
Uli, I volunteer for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you have the ticket already.
But not the code.
Yeah, you have everything in GitHub.
Shit.
Then I want to lift the code to support the whole feature set of Xorg 1.4.2. That's mostly done. I just need to lift it up to the latest NX code. Once we have that, we can easily update to 1.5.0 feature set, and from then on, it should be relatively easy to do the next steps and finally reach 1.20 eventually. That is a dream of me. Then what I also discovered is when you using nested sessions in rootless mode. So when you do a rootless session where you just get an X term or something and start another one from there to another destination, you cannot use the first session anymore, the local session anymore, because there's some screen grabbing stuff involved. I improved that, but it's still not working perfectly. Then there are a lot of variables in the code that are actually booleans, but aren't used as booleans. Well, C doesn't support booleans, but at least the code has some macros for defining booleans, and you can simplify comparisons by simply checking if it's true or false, which cleans up the code again.
We've had a few technical glitches earlier on, so I decided to give you a few extra minutes, but you should finish within the next 5 minutes or so, if that's
I think
possible.
I have this in the next slide, and then I'm done. So I have some code that makes even more use of the Xorg timers I used for the timeout stuff and the splash screen, and that will enable us to drop a huge part of the code from Xorg that had to be derived and changed. Then a colleague of mine is also using NX. Well, before Corona, now he's not using it at the moment, and he constantly came to his office desktop in the morning and tried to connect to his remote session, and it did not work anymore. The reconnect never was possible, and it turned out that this is connected to the sleep option we offer. If you have a session that is doing a lot of graphic stuff, then all those graphic operations pile up, and the code never reaches the point where it can detect that someone wants to reconnect to the session. The fix we found is connect with GDB and patch some variables, and then you can reconnect. I've debugged that, and I have some code that will probably make that issue vanish, but it needs some polishing. I have some more fixes for the Mato window manager stuff I mentioned before, and I also have code for the keystroke to reset the clipboard, But here I'm currently a bit unsure what I should the clipboard what state the clipboard should have after that keystroke. But it's not a big thing. Well, and then this is the last slide. I wanted to mention some stuff that came up during the last year. Around Sylvester, Dimbor, I mentioned Dimbor a couple of times in this presentation. Dimbor is a programmer from Russia that added some code in the past to NX, and from time to time he suddenly appears and contributes stuff. And he's also roughly connected to Ethersoft, who's also offering an NX-based product in Russia. Well, he vanished. He appeared around Sylvester and showed me his own version of OpenNX and of FreeNX server. So what he did is he has an OpenNX version that is running on current distribution. You might remember OpenNX was a free alternative to the NoMachine NX client that could be used to connect to the FreeNX server or to the the NoMachine server. Well, he has a current version with some enhancement, and he also has a current version of the FreeNX server with some enhancements. FreeNX was abandoned years ago, it seems, but now we have a current version. And under those two URLs, you can get that and drop X2Go as a whole if you want to. You can still use NX, the version from Arctica.
I have, in fact, thought about also packaging that for Debian. Oh, you might not want to hear that, but it's just as a study, as a case study, and also to have a counterpart for Remina NX plugin to test the NX plugin against.
Yeah, I think the FreeNX server here can simply be used with the Remina, right?
Yeah, it should. The only thing is that in NX you had private and public DSA keys, SSH DSA keys that were shipped bundled with the software. For the initial handshake, you had some SSHing into the server, and that was handled by package-wise deployed SSH keys, private keys and public keys. And they are still DSA, the old ones that have been used. And DSA keys are disabled in recent SSH versions. So yeah, one should talk Dimbor into generating an RSA or whatever key, because the concept cannot be dropped of shipping keys, but they should be sort of updated to some recent algo.
Yeah, that's a GitHub repo, so you can simply open an issue.
Yeah. Thanks for the links. I haven't known those.
And around that time, I tried to use that, and I also wanted to find out what special stuff the original NoMachine NX client was doing, because there are several parts in the NX, several locations in the NX code that well, they do strange stuff, and I suspect that most of that stuff is connected to communicating to the original NX client binary, and I wanted to find out what this client was doing. So I wanted to connect with that client to the new FreeNX server, and it didn't work because the NX client is quite old and doesn't work on current distributions. And open an issue there, and someone provided a preload binary that fixes those issues and makes the really old NoMachine NX client work on current systems. Then I greatly enhanced the workaround description on the X2Go wiki, because more and more people came up with GLX problems. And I think we should even go a step farther and provide some little wrapper and a compiled GLX xlib, so that people can simply run their GLX, their OpenGL applications with that wrapper and don't have to go through that lengthy manual workaround. What do you think of that?
Is that a packaging thing only, or upstream development in some sort of way?
It's well, you should add the compilation of that workaround library in the X2Go build process and add it to the X2Go packages.
Yeah, but is it something that is required when NX agent is built, or is it something just an LD
At runtime.
At the runtime.
It's required at runtime.
Okay, so yeah, so then it's okay.
The idea is that people start their X2Go session, and then they want to use an OpenGL application that's not running out of the box with X2Go.
Yeah.
They can run a little starter, for example, X2Go GLX, and then their program.
Okay.
And it will set up the environment and start the program.
That sounds nice. Okay.
I have mocked my idea on that side.
Okay. I mentally made a note.
Okay. The last two things, well, I had some motivation problems the last month because we started to have really long review cycles. Sometimes I had to wait for months before anyone took a look at my pull requests.
I'm sorry for that.
This is not even demotivating. It's also creating problems when you try to depend on a feature you already had a pull request, but it's not upstream, and develop the next code. So I really hope we can speed up that again.
Okay. So as I am, Yannick, you have done reviews as well.
Yeah.
But I've been the main reviewer, the one who did that, and I created these long cycles. So I'm sorry for that. It's just probably, yeah, I could have excuses, but I don't. Be nasty with me and ping me and ping me and ping me. Get on my nerves. That's the only thing that really helps. So that if I get that ping in a free minute, I'll do the PR review.
Okay, everybody has heard that. I'm allowed
yes.
to nag Mike.
Use all the channels, text messages, email. Yeah.
Okay, I will.
Yeah, please. And then I'll be happy to. It's just
folks, we really need to speed up so Chris gets his chance.
Yeah.
Okay, last sentence. That is also interesting. Most people say, "Oh, I don't know what to do in my free time that I got through Corona, COVID-19." That was not the case for me. I didn't have more, but a lot less time. I'm not really sure how that came, but I didn't come around to do anything I wanted to do. I don't know. Was it the same for you?
No. I was busier. This is Chris.
I guess we all were. And there's this thing called Zoom fatigue.
Was Zoom fatigue?
Yeah, like when you spend too much time in Zoom meetings or in Jitsi meetings, if you're an open source person, then you just feel tired in the evening, exhausted.
This could be, yeah.
Well, and I had
a lot more telephone conferences.
Yeah, and I had a lot of people who actually needed IT support. So schools needing e-learning management systems, stuff like that. So I was actually working quite a lot and had loads of paid customer projects that I didn't want to disappoint. So less free time for free development.
Okay, so I'm not alone in that. That was my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so we are already past the next break. So Chris, are you comfortable with starting now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, then let me just point out to Vadim that his talk will now move to the 2025 slot, if I'm not confused. Let me check again. Yes, Vadim, sorry, we can't do it any sooner. 2025 for yours. I hope that's okay for you. And one comment in the chat. Okay, that was Vadim giving his okay. So Chris, let's roll.
Okay, let me. Okay, is everything okay there? Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay, so firstly, thanks for inviting me to this. It's it's interesting to meet everybody and hear what's going on behind the scenes with X2Go. And I guess I'm gonna just talk about or kind of tell a story, looking at from the other side. So kind of as a user of X2Go, but how I came across X2Go and what we use it for, and what it's turned into for us. So more generally, then we're talking about I work in scientific computing, and specifically, it's something called computational fluid dynamics. I've been involved with an open source software called OpenFoam for nearly 25 years. It's a really big project. In this area, there's two in particular, really large companies with commercial software where they're charging license fees that start at sort of 20,000, whatever currency you like, per year for a single user. And probably the second biggest of those two was sold recently for $1 billion or nearly $1 billion. In fact, it's Siemens who owns it now. But we're the open source alternative. We've probably got as many users as certainly the last company I just mentioned, the second of those two. And so I've quite a big responsibility now for this software. It's a whole chunk of C++. The software runs in parallel, so you can run simulations on clusters and supercomputers and so on. And one of the major bits of third-party software we rely on is ParaView, which is for visualization of the results. But anyway, the rest of it's just our stuff. So just give you an idea what CFD is like. You want to simulate some fluid flow. So in the case of the air going across a car body, you generate what we call a mesh, which is a kind of breaking up the flow domain into a bunch of cells, and you can see that there on the screen. You can have cells of different size. You certainly need small enough ones to resolve the details of objects at the boundary of the fluid. So around the car there, you've got some small cells. If you look a bit closer, you can see the sort of size you could be dealing with, which means that you're going to end up with quite a large number of cells. And you solve equations for fluid flow, forces, heat, thermodynamics, chemistry even. You can have discrete particles in there. So there's a whole lot of functionality that we have. And for that case, you generate a flow solution. These are streamlines of the air kind of relative to the car. You get typical thing is recirculation in the wake. That'll determine to a large extent the drag force on the car. So people are going to use this for predictions of drag and lift on a car. And some of the big automotive companies use it. So VW Group in Germany and elsewhere, they're using the software. There's other applications I can show you. So from marine engineering, this is a propeller, and you want to use this to calculate the thrust, and there's a kind of balance between the rotational speed of the propeller and the flow speed of the boat. You're looking at there the speed of the water being driven away from the propeller. Red's the high values, blue's the low values. You get these little structures where the flow sort of goes around the tips of the blades, and in the bottom diagram you can sort of visualize those as these sort of little tubes. So that's one application in one bit of engineering. We do a lot of work with chemical engineering, process engineering, particularly in Germany. So this is a stirred tank where you've got a reaction going between a liquid in the tank, and then you blow gas through the tank, and you stir it up to control the bubble sizes, and that'll control the speed of your reaction. So here's a simulation. Obviously the blue bits there on the left are sort of bubbles that are being generated. The baffles are the shaft spinning. The baffles are mixing things up, and chemical engineers will run simulations to try and optimize something like this. And then civil engineering, in the bottom, probably better in the bottom, you can see this very large weir. It's what we call a spillway on the edge of a dam. It's actually a huge dam in Australia. I think that the length from left to right is about 1.5 kilometers. I think the height of the spillway is 35 meters, so something like that. And if the reservoir overflows and the water flows over the spillway, then you can see it traveling down the spillway and off to the right. But what you end up with in this kind of problem is something called a hydraulic jump. It's a sort of strange phenomena where you've got quite thin layer of fluid down the front of the spillway, but you get a jump in height in the fluid, and then that causes sort of a lot of air to get entrained. So you get this foamy sort of mass of air and water, and that tends to churn, and it tends to erode the spillway, which can be very dangerous. And academics use it. This stuff. This is a sort of fundamental problem where you've got a sort of fluid in a domain there. On the bottom, the surface is very slightly warmer than the top, so the air at the bottom is heated up and it wants to rise. But how's some of the air going to rise, hit the top, and fall down? Well, these sort of cell-like structures develop because you've got a bit of air rising up, and then it'll travel along the top and fall down. And because the air's going up in this section, the next cell runs in the clockwise direction. So you get this alternating clockwise, anti-clockwise flow. You can see, you can actually see this effect when you're cooking a kind of curry-like sauce in a pan. If you see little sort of cell-like structures on the top surface, it's to do with this. Now,
Chris, the halfway mark of your talk.
Yeah, okay. So, how does X2Go come into this? So we're not academics. We're all working. We're a company dedicated to providing this bit of software. So we need to find some way of earning money. Traditionally, these are the three things we've done. So provide services around the software to earn money, development of the software, support of users of the software, and training. And in the training side of things, we've been doing a lot of this for over 10 years now. I've been the main trainer, traveling around the world, delivering training in training centers and on site. I've done over 500 days worth, 2,500 people. Some point about 4 or 5 years ago, we decided or thought we needed to be able to deliver training online. And so we put a kind of package of tools together to enable us to do that. We had video conferencing. Originally, we just used Hangouts, which was reasonably effective. We've sort of turned to Zoom a couple of years ago. For the participants, we wanted to have pre-configured machines. So we got those set up on the cloud using Amazon Web Services. And then we stuck the X2Go server on those remote machines so that the participants could connect with the remote desktop. So that was our choice of remote desktop from day one. I guess, it's worth asking why. So why does a user choose X2Go? Because for me, it's the standout option for something like this. Well, one, we deal with open source software, so generally we want to go down open source routes. A big thing for us was the multi-platform client support, so Linux, Windows, Mac OS. We knew people were going to be attending this training from using those kinds of machines, and I'm not sure there was anything that could offer that. The fact it was packaged for Ubuntu was great for us, because our preferred platform for the remote machines is Ubuntu, so we could just unpack the server software on there, and also it's convenient on the client side as well. We've run courses around the world where the remote machines are quite a distance from the customer. So let's say someone in Japan running on AWS in Singapore, and no one's ever complained about the speed of the system. Personally, I've had hundreds of people through the training, and I would say it's been really reliable. There's maybe a couple of things that have cropped up from time to time, but I think maybe it's that we don't use all the features because we don't need them, but the core functionality is really great. And also screen sharing was important, because we needed the instructor to be able to go and to log onto the machine, to connect to the machine and help the user out. We can be running courses like this, so participants attending from 8 participants from those locations there. We run the remote machines reasonably locally, but they're not always that close. Once we got all that together for training, we thought this is really useful. The combination of cloud plus X2Go, can we make that generally available to people? And very quickly we put it on the so-called marketplace of AWS. It looks like this, the remote desktop, so we can do everything we need. We've got the ParaView visualization, terminal, the Mate or Mate desktop. We're the latest. Currently, we're running 1804, but we're probably going to move to 2004. So it's now a product on the marketplace. We charge 2 cents a core hour on the software. The hardware cost is roughly 10 cents, but people often do CFD using the unused capacity with spot pricing. So still the software is cheaper than the hardware cost. So people are quite happy just to pay for this convenient pre-configured system. An X2Go server is an integral part of that system. We've created a command line interface for deployment, which has been really good. What I found was that using, I can also incorporate the desktop for that, and so the X2Go client. But I found using the Pi-Hoker client was most useful for that. It's got a couple of features that were very advantageous. And yeah, the system's great. On the cloud, you can create clusters now with pretty good scaling and do some really good CFD. So cloud's added to our list of things. At the same time, we sort of identified maintenance as a separate sort of thing that we were doing. I'll talk about more of that in a minute. All these things are quite tightly bound together, so we have a closely knit team that works across all those areas. One thing I will say is that if the services are on the left, and sort of some key activities relating to that are down the middle, like redesign, like Uli was saying, that a lot of work I think he's been doing, repairing new code, etc. I think these activities relate to those services, and what comes out is a much better code. So on the right, I'm really talking about the code qualities that come out of those activities. We sort of highlight these things as the 5 qualities we want from our CFD software, and if we work on those, then it would make a much better code. To the extent that I think developing scientific software without a services business behind it, just will never produce the same level of quality that we've achieved with OpenFOAM. So it's really the services that lead to the activities that lead to the quality. Some of those things historically, we didn't feel there's anyone was paying for them, and we knew how much they cost. And I chatted to a guy called Mike Woster. He's the Chief Revenue Officer, Linux Foundation. And he gave me an hour of his time one day and just said on the phone and said, basically, tell your customers that this cost is there, this work has to be done, and get them to pay for it. And he really insisted, he really pushed me. And so we started to do that. And after about a year, we launched a campaign to get the cost of that work funded. And there's the cost. And first year, we sort of reached that target you see at the bottom. Last year, we were there. This year, we're there. So we're steadily creeping up to have the maintenance of the code fully funded. My last word is then that because I'm in that situation with managing an open source project, I appreciate the situation of all open source projects, and I can imagine that X2Go is in the same situation. So, you know, we've put a bit of money into the X2Go project, but our view on this is that we're committed to that. So basically, out of the money we make out of the cloud,
and we are very grateful for that.
yeah. Well, out of the money that we get from the cloud, we are going to consistently hand over a fixed percentage of that profit. So profit we make from the cloud product, a fixed percentage will always get transferred to X2Go. So it's not like an act of sort of altruism that we do this. It's because you're a critical element of this product we have, and so we want you to be successful, and so whatever we can afford to give you, we are going to do. That's it really. But you know, Stefan knows that I've interacted with Stefan about, you know, sponsoring the event, and then, you know, this year we sort of moved that funds to elsewhere. My view is that it's really hands off. You obviously know how to you know, produce a good product, so you spend the money however you want. It really doesn't matter to us at all. So we will continue to do that. That, you know, to fund you, and just to say that the usage of that cloud product is increasing, so the funding should increase each year.
That is really good to know. And I think there was only 1 year in the past where your funding was not enough to fund the macOS cloud host that we use for the macOS client builds. Like from the beginning when you started up until now, there's just 1 year where your funding was below the required amount. So that's really cool.
Well, I think, yeah, and on that, I just think, Stefan, we might just, I know at different times in the year we kind of we you know, we connect about the funding, but we probably should just sort of formalize it and just, you know, kind of go, okay, on this date, like every year we'll get in touch, and I'll let you know what the situation is. But yes, I want to thank you all really sincerely. Everyone in our company, CFD Direct, is hugely grateful for what you've done, and we're trying to, you know, express that gratitude by funding you in some way, and we'll push it. We'll do whatever we can to make sure that you have some funds to work on the code.
Thank you very much. So we're almost into the time slot for Vadim's talk. We have like 3 minutes if anyone has questions for you. So please raise your hand, make yourself heard. Uli would like to speak. Yes, Uli, please go on.
Thanks for that interesting presentation. I would like to know if you're using RDMA within Amazon Cloud for that distributed workloads.
No, is that? I'm not up on all the technical stuff. Is that to do with the authentication, or?
No, RDMA means remote direct memory access using InfiniBand interconnects, for example.
No. No. So on the for the CFD, for the parallelization on CFD, AWS doesn't have InfiniBand. It has its own network connection now. So there's sort of its own sort of protocol. There's OpenMPI supports has support for it, I think now. So if we just use a recent version of OpenMPI, we can use this thing. It's they call it a network connector. So they've got their own network connector to improve the or reduce the latency for the communication on when you're running a cluster. And yeah, so, but this is a CFD issue. I'm not sure if your question was about X2Go or was about, you know, the application we're talking about.
Oh no, it's about HPC compute.
Yeah. Okay.
Stuff, because that's what our customers are doing.
Right. Okay.
The company I work in.
Okay.
And RDMA is key in performance, so that I was just wanted to know if you.
Well, yeah. Just a quick answer then. That yeah, AWS introduced or did a lot of work about a year or two ago on particularly on reducing latency for parallel communication across clusters, and it had a very good effect. That we were getting linear scaling at sort of 500 and 1,000 cores when we hadn't been before. So I think suddenly they very suddenly were able to sell their platform as a system that you could in which you could cluster instances, and it was worth your while doing so. It was good to, you know, it was a good platform.
Okay, my second question is short. You mentioned two competitors commercially. The one is Star CCM, of course, and the other one is Ansys?
Yes, Ansys. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so it's time for Vadim's talk, finally. Vadim, please unmute yourself, turn your camera on, turn your screen sharing on. Let's go.
Hello. Okay.
Vadim, I'm sorry, I have to leave right now. I'll catch up on YouTube.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Goodbye.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye, Mike.
Bye.
My camera doesn't want to work. It says error obtaining camera permission. What the hell? It worked right just before.
Okay, then let's try it without the camera. Just do the screen sharing then.
Yeah, I suppose that's kind of a pain, but that's strange.
We can try later on for the Q&A to get you full screen with the camera again.
Okay.
All right. Sorry, quickly, Stefan. I think I need to go. I've just had a text from my wife saying that she's just got dinner for me. I'll catch up on YouTube and at a later date.
Okie doke. Then enjoy your dinner, enjoy your evening.
Thank you, everyone.
And talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay.
Bye now.
See ya. Okay, well, let's get started then. Is this working, right?
Not yet, no. We don't see any screen sharing yet.
Okay, sharing. Okay, there we go.
No, okay.
Okay, so I'm Vadim. I work for Kindle, a consulting company, and I work on QVD, which is a desktop virtualization product. So this talk is going to be about how we implemented audio compression. And now, first, a little introduction, just so that everyone is clear on what's going on here. Kindle Group is an international consulting company. We specialize in Linux, and we do many things, including software development, support, and IT training. And we also have our own product, which is QVD. It's open source and available under the GPL3 license. QVD is a desktop virtualization system. It's focused on high-density deployments. Right. So just the basics of what QED is about. We provide virtual desktops for our users. This can be for things like testing or providing a highly specific unrestricted environment to the employees of a company, or it can be used to provide a perfectly normal remote desktop. We support KVM and LXC containers. Basically, in our product, what we try to do is to maximize the number of desktops that fit into a server, so we definitely prefer LXC. And we also try to work with low-end connections, which is where things like bandwidth usage become important. But on the other hand, we also want to be as functional as possible. So if somebody needs sound, or for instance, we want to be able to provide it. All right, we don't use X2Go. What we actually use is the NX libraries to provide the desktop environment, and we build our product on top of that. And yeah, okay. And as I mentioned, we right. And in different types of deployments, we may be providing desktops that are only temporary. And all the data is lost after it shuts down, so that every time, for instance, an employee logs in the morning, they get an entirely fresh setup. So this also influences a little bit our motivation for this, because we want to avoid anything that could interfere with the host machine. Right. So what happened here? Give me a second. It's out of order. Okay. Audio. A quick introduction to how audio works in NX. NX agent listens on the media port. The connection is forwarded to the remote site, that's to the client side, and it just connects to the Pulse audio server running over there. And the virtual machine has the Pulse server environment variable pointing to the port. So that's pretty simple. That's how it works in the default implementation. So the upsides of the setup, it's simple, and really nothing much besides that, because it has a whole lot of disadvantages that we found. So first of all, bandwidth usage is enormous. There's no encoding of any kind. So if we're speaking about sending normal quality audio, that's 1.4 megabits per second. That's not very good. An additional problem with this is that audio uses one connection per application. So if by some chance you have more than one thing going on at once, like for instance a YouTube video and just some system sounds, well, that's going to be 1.4 megabits per application. Another issue with that is that applications lose their audio connection when the user disconnects, because it's the connection goes through the NX channel, and once the session is suspended, and that channel disappears. So every application suddenly is disconnected from the audio server. Also, the way this works actually provides a little bit too much access to the host's Pulse audio server, and we don't quite like that, because, well, it does introduce the possibility that something might interfere in some undesirable way with the audio system of the host. So that definitely should be avoided, especially things like changing settings and loading modules. And finally, there's the issue of that audio traffic competes with other NX data. The NX system goes through just one TCP connection and has an internal system that interleaves the different channels between them, which means that if something is keeping the system very busy, it can actually downgrade the performance of the desktop. So not only do you have bad sounding audio, you are running into bandwidth problems, but you are also going to run into the desktop itself and starting to malfunction. So that's not very good, and that's definitely something we wanted to fix. So we've come up with a solution for this. First, we run a Pulse Audio server inside the virtual machine or container. This solves already two problems. First of all, that the audio server doesn't disappear because there's always an audio server running, and that means, and Pulse Audio is just nicely accepts connections even if it can't play anything anywhere. So pretty much nothing notices that this session is suspended and that there is no audio available. Also, an extra benefit of this is that Pulse Audio provides mixing. So just having a local Pulse Audio server means that we just get one audio stream on the output. So even without any compression at all, we're already saving something if anytime there's more than one thing going on at the same time. Now, on top of this, we implement Opus compression for Pulse Audio. This has many advantages. First, of course, it's dramatically lower bandwidth usage. The normal bandwidth use for uncompressed audio is 1.4 megabits, and for Opus, we can easily compress it down to 64K or even much lower. Opus is also a very modern, flexible codec, which gets anywhere from CD quality audio to very low bitrate. That's
one question, if I may. You said 64 kilobits. That's for the audio alone, or the complete data transfer, like the NX signals as well?
No, we're talking about audio only here.
Okay, so that's on. Okay.
Yeah, NX just consumes a variable amount of bandwidth depending on what you're doing on and what's on your screen. This is 64 kilobits as a kind of suggested value. You can change it to anything the codec supports, which is, I think, from 512K down to something like 4K maybe. Okay. So yeah, Opus is a very modern codec. It's the successor to the Vorbis codec, which was already a worthy successor to MP3. So we're working with very new and very good technology here, and it's used, for instance, in Jitsi and Discord, among other things. Another benefit of using this codec is that it's actually adjustable in real time. So there exist some interesting possibilities that we may be able to use in the future. So this improves desktop performance by a lot, because since we're interleaving audio with other streams like the X11 compressed data inside the same socket, well, performance might be affected. It's actually just compressing audio improves it by quite a lot. Additionally, it's a variable bitrate codec, so if there's silence going on, it takes almost nothing on no bandwidth at all. And yeah, it can be tuned for the desired quality of bandwidth. So if you want to listen to very high quality audio, you can. And if you just want to hear the occasional notification, you can tune it down to something very small and just and that also works.
Have
Right.
you considered doing this dynamically, like checking the available bandwidth, or like increasing audio quality only if this sound plays for more than 10 or 15 seconds, so it's no longer, or so it's unlikely to be a system sound?
Currently, we don't do that, but it's possible. But really, Opus does it automatically. It's a variable bitrate codec, so it adjusts quality automatically depending on what's going on. Like if there's silence and all you hear is the occasional ding, well, it's not going. It's pretty much going to encode the silence as nothing at all. So, okay, right. So why take this approach? Well, first we need to provide a package Pulse Audio anyway for our client because we support Windows and OS X, which don't run Pulse Audio anyway. So we've been packaging it all along. So, and this minimizes the number of components. We don't need to add anything extra. We're just adding additional functionality to a component we were using anyway. We think this also fits quite nicely into Pulse Audio, which already has networking functionality, so we're not doing anything all that weird either. And Pulse Audio provides a control protocol that can be used for adjustments and monitoring. And that's Pulse Audio has a protocol that can be used for loading modules, setting up networking, checking which devices are present, things like that. So we don't need to implement our own system for controlling the connection because Pulse Audio already gives us one. And we hope that we can get this accepted upstream, which will save us work in the future. But meanwhile, we still have it. Okay, so there is a patch. It was originally developed by somebody called Gavin Darkglider and was submitted to the freedesktop.org bug tracker. But we've made improvements on top of that. We've ported it to the latest version of Pulse Audio and made some improvements on top of that. And there's been a slight
the Pulse Audio server in the VM on the server part and have it do all the mixing and just send one stream data out. But I actually like it that that you can connect your local Pulse Audio daemon directly to the client side, to the server side, so that programs on the server side also can see every sound card you've got in your client system and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But
okay, and we're back with the live streaming, so feel free to continue whenever you want.
Okay, shall we repeat what was been lost, or
not?
That would probably be a good idea, yes.
Yes, so we had first a question about submitting it to the mailing list. So yeah, there's been some doubts about whether this is appropriate in Pulse Audio, but we're going to give it a try anyway. And there was another question about that this hides the
client
devices.
side,
yeah,
sound cards,
the
information of Pulse Audio itself.
Yeah. So yeah, well, this is a bit of a matter of preference, of taste, really. In our particular usage, this is kind of more convenient for us because we don't want the remote machine interfering in any way with the client's audio system. Like, for instance, we want to be able to deploy highly locked down environments in which the user can't change anything and can't screw anything up. So in that sense, this is a very highly preferable solution. But of course, I mean, it's open source. You can disable it if you want and to go back to the old system. That's also a possibility.
Yeah, but that's not helping if you want to have compressed data. So,
well,
Yeah, but well, basically, I mean, I cannot compress the data if I just connect to my local client-side Pulse Audio server directly, and that's my problem with that approach, because it's not transparently in the transport path, but it's on one side only, or well, you actually compress the data after it comes out of Pulse Audio. You basically compress everything that is being sent over the TCP stream, right? Right.
Nito would like to say something.
Okay.
Nito, unmute yourself and.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. One of the ways you could actually implement this would be if there would be compression on the channel side.
Yeah.
On the next channel. So you would be, the difference is that Opus is really optimized for sound. So it's a compression protocol specific for sound, but nothing stops you to have compressed channels. So you would be able to use compressed channels either on SSH or an X, depending what you use.
Yeah, sure, but I still don't get the benefit. I mean, I'd like Pulse Audio to automatically compress and decompress the audio stream as it's being sent over the network transparently. And
but that's difficult because
yeah,
it would be a change on the client library. It's a Pulse server socket.
Yeah. Okay. So by the way, if possible, we should kind of leave this for a bit later, because I'm going to cover a couple things that might kind of illustrate how we're doing this, and perhaps that will kind of inform a bit of the discussion for later time.
Martin, before you go on, Uli had a question as well.
Okay.
No more.
Okay. So we slightly refactored this patch. We've upgraded to the latest version of Pulse Audio. We've made all the Opus parameters configurable that could be made configurable. That wasn't in the original. And we've also managed to make them possible to change at runtime, which opens some interesting possibilities, like, for instance, just having the user just open settings dialog, for instance, and change their audio quality, or even fancier things than that, or have automatic adjustment. Okay. Now, so a simple illustration of how this works in Pulse Audio. This probably doesn't mean very much to people who never got deep into it, but it's actually pretty simple. Pulse Audio has a control system with the PA-CMD command, or you can just put this into the default .pa config file. So what we're doing here is on the server sender, we're loading a module. That's module channel sync new. Sync in Pulse Audio terminology is anything that receives audio and outputs it somewhere, like speakers or a network socket. We just give it a name. We tell it where the server is, where to send it. And the compression equals Opus. That's the only addition we need in additional that's not in the Pulse Audio documentation without the patch. So this is pretty much the standard setup that you'd see in the Pulse Audio documentation. And on the receiving side, you need to load the native protocol module, and it's preferable that you set up a limit IP-based limit, or there are different authentication options in there, just for security, so that if you don't want anybody connecting to that. Okay. And here's an example of how one would modify parameters. There's a update sync prop list command, which we've used to, for instance, change the active bandwidth for the encoder, and this takes effect immediately, so that you can't just do this in the middle of a connection. Right, so now there's the interesting bit. How do we implement this in QED in the client? Well, we support multiple operating systems, and on Windows we just build and package our own Pulse Audio. So this is pretty straightforward. We've already been doing that, and there's that bit of configuration above, but there's nothing complicated about it. Same on OS X, of course. And on Linux, there's a difference. We now must build and package our own Pulse Audio, but this gets a little bit more complicated. So we have three possibilities on Linux. First is that the system supports Opus natively. That's in the case if our patch has been accepted upstream, already merged, and the user has already it installed, which currently is not the case, unfortunately. The second possibility is that the user has our own Pulse Audio package, which is what we provide. And the third possibility is that the user doesn't have our package, nor do they have Opus compression. Well, this is not a configuration we intend to use, but it's supported by the client anyway. Like, it's going to figure out you don't have compression, and it's going to give you a warning that, well, compression is not going to work, but you're going to have audio anyway. Right, so here comes the tricky bit. Running a custom Pulse Audio on Linux. First of all, it's probably people have realized that replacing the system Pulse Audio is a bit of a dangerous idea. For quite a few reasons, actually. First, it needs to be done for every distribution, and of course every version of each distribution. It would be easy to get something wrong and break the user system. And the custom Pulse Audio will be there even if our client is not running. And while we do have setups that are just very specifically for custom made for custom deployments, we certainly do intend to be used by normal people who just download the client from our website. And of course, this makes upgrades quite complicated because we have to keep track with every update of every distribution that we support. So we don't actually do that because, well, that wouldn't work all that great and will be kind of a pain to maintain. So what do we do? Well, first of all, we do have one instance in the virtual machine, as we already mentioned. And we do have two instances on the client side. So this is the funny bit. One is our patched version, and one is the system's own version. And the way it works is that we actually have a tunnel that first goes from the virtual machine to the patched version to the system version, and our own version just adds as the compressor for the audio. So this is a bit of extra complexity in the system, but not too bad actually. And the client actually checks if you have Opus compression in your system Pulse Audio, and if you do, you can skip the entire part about running two instances on your system. So here's a little diagram for what this looks like, just for clarity. We have VM server, which runs multiple desktops. There's a Pulse Audio with our patches running in there. The connection goes through the NX media channel. That's already the compressed audio, and it reaches the QED client on the Linux client's user's machine. From there, the compressed audio is forwarded to, again, a patched version of our pulse audio. And it decompresses it and sends it to the system one. And there are control channels established with both of them for establishing all those connections and authentication. So the difference here is that since we have our own pulse audio, we don't really care about any kind of distribution specific functionality, and it only runs so long our client runs. So it's just very tuned for our particular application and really nothing else besides that. So how this works, the Linux client talks to the pulse audio using the Unix socket. In the same way the PACMD command does, if anybody has used that. It tests if the system pulse audio supports compression. It will launch our patched version if it's needed. And it sets up the network connections between them. Right, on the Windows and OS X sides, it's quite a lot simpler. The client launches our custom pulse audio build because, well, it's not there's no pulse audio on those systems. They have a custom-made configuration file that gets rewritten to load the right modules and absolutely nothing else. And there's no system pulse audio, so there's the entire forwarding setup just isn't there. Okay, so there are some challenges with this setup we've encountered. First of all, pulse audio doesn't actually provide a very good way of checking if the compression is supported. Like it would be nice to have some way of checking which version of a module is there, for instance, but unfortunately that's not there. So what we actually do is just to attempt to set up a connection and see if it worked. It works fine, but there are a couple things there that I don't quite like. But we haven't had any actual trouble. And the second issue is that we actually need a quite custom build without dbus support on impulse audio and a custom home location to avoid them interfering with each other. So yeah, it works, but it took a little bit of work to convince two pulse audio instances on the same system to cooperate with each other. With the hope to make some future improvements, possibly improving the detection of what the system pulse audio supports. This is kind of a little thing, but well, it's in there anyway. And the more important one is the take advantage of the possibilities of runtime control. So we could be doing a better job doing things like, for instance, detecting congestion and automatically dropping bandwidth, or offering the user the ability to tune the parameters more deeply. Currently, this is still in the works. Right, and I guess that will be it. Questions?
Nito would like to speak.
Yes, of course.
I actually have a question for Uli. Uli, is there a way to know which bandwidth or which bit rate is actually being used inside of NX? Are you aware of anything like that?
There is code for congestion control, but that is incomplete as far as I know.
Okay.
So I think you could get some numbers from that system, but neither in a convenient way, nor do I know if that's in any way correct or usable.
Okay, thank you.
I'm wondering if you can also support systems that do not have pulse audio at all, just older systems that only have, let's say, some kind of ELSA or so.
Not really kind of the standard setup that we target. I mean, we are a consulting company. If you have a particular situation that needs it, we certainly could discuss it. But I mean, as a kind of consulting kind of work, I mean. But yeah, I mean, these days everyone runs Pulse Audio, so that's the setup we made the client for. But yeah, the source is out there. Certainly, it could be modified to work with something else, should there be a need for that.
Oh, just curious.
I mean, if you compress everything down to, well, not really compress, but if you push down everything to one stream, to one audio stream, well, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to give that directly to author or something like that and play it back. But you'd have to forego Pulse Audio directly, maybe, after you did. But I mean, you probably still need a custom Pulse Audio built to receive the data. But you don't need to hook into the system Pulse Audio device or server, which also means that this will make building your special Pulse Audio server more complicated because you need to include support for ALSA and UDEF and other stuff.
Yeah, certainly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be sufficient if you took out the decompression, the ALSA protocol and the decompression, and implement that in a small library, and then simply use the system audio instead of going through all the Pulse Audio stuff again?
If you took what? Sorry.
You get a signal. You get a Pulse Audio protocol with the compressed audio on the client side. And then you route that to the Pulse Audio, and the Pulse Audio finally routes it to another Pulse Audio, and that one routes it to the sound device. I think it should be possible to drop your own Pulse Audio if you only take out the decompression and the Pulse Audio protocol into a small piece of code and pass the result of that decompression to the local sound system, whatever it might be.
Well, so of course, but you'd be pretty much writing your own audio server. So this is the native Pulse Audio protocol. It actually does things like controlling latency 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 and there's a possibility of sending commands over it. So it's not really straightforward, and really you'd have to interpret this protocol and deal with audio devices. So yeah, of course it can be done, but it's not really trivial.
So there's no chance to build a Pulse Audio module for your client side that you just hook into the existing Pulse Audio?
You could do that. I mean, it's the Pulse Audio is on our GitHub. You can build anything you want on it, and of course mess around with the client if you want to. But the intended setup is that since it just forwards everything to the system one, well, you can just load any modules you want in the system one, which is already fully featured and can be is the normal way the system is kind of supposed to be used.
I think Alex has some similar setup in mind. He mentioned that some years ago at some gathering. Does anyone know if he has implemented anything?
I'm not sure if it was Alex or if it was even Mike, but one of those two, Mike one actually, but one of those two mentioned an audio driver or some virtual sound card device or something that he came up with. So that was one part.
Alex, yeah.
I don't remember, but I think it was Alex. Well, I think we should have something similar in X2Go.
Mm.
So the question is, how modular and how portable is the code that Kindle wrote? How easy is that to port over to X2Go?
Well, the code is on our GitHub. Feel free to take a look. And the kind of the command that we use is right there in the presentation. I can actually, I'll just upload that somewhere later. So, and I'll be around. So feel free to talk to me, and we'll see where we go with this. So yeah, just give me a second. Yeah, here's my email address if you need it. And yeah, my name is complicated, so I should have an alias that's just my first name at kindle.com as well. So yeah, so if you want to discuss this, you can mail me or the team.
Okay.
Maybe you would like to contribute that.
Unfortunately, I'm pretty busy already, but definitely I'll consider it.
Okay.
So, any further questions for Vadim?
Yeah, just to be sure, the pulse audio on the server and the pulse audio on the client is the same binary?
So yeah, let me just scroll down to this.
No, I can say that another way. You only distribute one open pulse audio package. You don't distinguish between server and client.
Yeah, it's the same package on both sides, right? So here I indicated with the little icons, like you see, here's depending on which logo is next to the Pulse Audio one, that's the one in use. So yeah. So yeah, the same package can be used on both sides. At least if you have the same distribution, like it's Ubuntu on both sides. So yeah, the same package works.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I may have missed it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I may have missed it, but how do you interconnect two pulse audio devices?
Oh yeah.
By using virtual things, right?
Yeah, this is just exactly the same that. Wait. Wait, it doesn't want to. For some reason, it doesn't want to go backwards. Okay. So yeah, pretty much this. So the only difference, and this is just the same between the two pulse audios, the only difference is that you skip the compression bit, and because well the system one doesn't support it.
Okay, so a virtual thing that connects to a different server. Okay.
Yeah, this is in the Pulse Audio documentation. You just search about the tunnel sync and native protocol TCP, and you'll find all the information about how to set it up and how it works.
Now you have a controlled environment on your server side. You have you set up the VMs yourself.
Yes.
When we consider transferring your work to an X2Go server, this might run on any machine set up by anyone. So chances are that there is already a pulse audio running.
Yeah, that's quite possible.
Is that a problem?
Well, you'd have to replace it for it to support compression, of course.
Yeah, I'm not talking about compression. I'm talking about configuration-wise. I'm not sure how Pulse Audio is working.
It's not really a
so-
problem because you can just start it in a different home directory, have its Unix socket lie not in the default location, or spawn a TCP connection on a different port, and it will be basically separate from your system Pulse Audio
Yeah.
server.
So
That's
that-
really not a
what I-
problem. That's what we essentially do on OS 10 and Windows already.
right. So here's the thing: the good part of this is implemented in our own client and our own management agent that runs in the virtual machine, right? So to implement this in X2Go, well, you can certainly take the Pulse Audio patch, but then you'd have to write the functionality to actually deal with all the stuff in X2Go. So there it's just up to the developer to choose how to deal with this. Like,
No, I think you got me wrong. What I mean is, for example, I set up a workstation. I want to work locally, and when I'm not there, I want to work remote on that machine. So I start an X2Go session to the machine, and there is an X2 and Pulse Audio server already running. How can I prevent that the sound is going to the local Pulse Audio within my X2Go session? I'm not sure how the applications contact Pulse Audio. How do they find the right Pulse Audio server?
Is there a system variable for that?
Yep.
Yep.
I mean, there's Pulse server, Pulse_server environment variable for exactly that case, but it won't help you, of course, if for already started programs, they will always reference the same Pulse Audio server. So you'd either have to restart your program, or you're out of luck, unless you try to.
With current X2Go.
Yeah. Well,
and with current or with pre-patched or with the QVD client before this patch was applied.
There's one. Sorry for interrupting,
Nico,
but this.
You raised your hand. Sorry. Go ahead.
One of the things that you could actually do is you can change the configuration of your local Pulse Audio to do a virtual sync or not. That is, and when you log in, you would need to do some kind of commands, obviously, either manually with PA-CMD, or you could actually script it whenever you do remote connection, saying, okay, now I'm remotely, reroute my Pulse Audio instead to the sound speakers to my virtual Pulse Audio. That could actually work for you.
Okay.
But you know that this is the control signaling that Vadim was talking about. You could actually signal your local and do fancy stuff.
Okay, if that Pulse Audio supports the fancy stuff I need.
No, because it's the virtual syncs. It's something that's Pulse Audio supported by default.
Forever. So from beginning of time, I think.
Well, not sure from when, but it's pretty old. It's pretty old.
Okay, so you can assume it's there. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, if there aren't any further questions, then I would like to thank you all for coming. Thank you all for doing your presentations here. Have a good evening, have a good night, and to Uli and Ionic, see you tomorrow.